Hello, my name is Bianca Spence, and I'm the program consultant for the book sector at Ontario Creates. This is an information session for the Global Market Development Program for the book industry. As you can see, it's undergone a name change from the Export Fund in order to be consistent with other sectors that Ontario Creates. However, the objectives of the program remain the same. Let's get into it. This is an overview of what we will be covering during this presentation. Please remember that this information session does not replace the guidelines. Be sure to read the guidelines carefully as we have updated them a bit. If you do have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us via email. Contact information can be found at the end of this presentation and as well on the Ontario Creates website. Historically, this has been a very successful program with an overall high level of results. The Global Market Development Program, which you'll probably hear me shorten to GMD throughout the course of this presentation, supports your virtual and in-person attendance at international markets and for targeted sales trips. I'm going to talk more about eligible activities in a few slides. There aren't any major changes to the program from last year as far as eligibility for applicants or eligible activities or available funding. However, there are some changes to the eligible expenses based on what we've learned while working through the global pandemic. That's another reason to review the guidelines very carefully. This is a results-focused program. We're looking for activities that produce measurable business results. That would be right sales, sales of finished products, new business contacts, and future partnership opportunities. The deadline to apply is May 2nd, 2022 at 5 p.m. As I always say, this is the last possible date that you can submit your application. You are always welcome to submit it earlier. Late applications will not be accepted. Applications are to be submitted by companies, not individuals. Your company needs to be export ready and have a global market development plan in place for a number of titles or a series. And you should also have projects with defined, achievable, and measurable business development goals. Your company needs to be Canadian owned and Ontario based, need to be incorporated, and you should be a private sector for-profit company. However, Ontario Creates will consider the eligibility of a not-for-profit publisher application if the publisher is able to provide a good business case as to how or why attendance at particular events is critical to the planned strategic growth of the company and can prove that the events will result in some measurable business growth that can be quantified as anticipated financial results. With regards to the company participants in these activities, you are allowed up to 3 representatives per activity. You should choose the individuals who are best suited to take advantage of this opportunity, and at least one participant at each event should be a decision maker at the executive level. The participants should be Canadian citizens, landed immigrants, or permanent residents. They do need to be residents of Ontario. Sales agents and any external consultants are ineligible, and ideally these representatives should be full-time employees with the company. We can make exceptions for senior level, long-term, part-time employees who have the authority to make key decisions for the company, but please check with Ontario Creates in advance to determine if this exception will be allowed. Ontario Creates is only going to accept 1 application per company or associated company per year. Some more eligibility criteria. Companies must have minimum sales revenues from Canadian authored titles of at least $20,000. Need to have derived more than 50% of your total sales revenues of the company from book sales. Companies need to have a minimum of 6 Canadian authored titles in print and have at least 2 books currently signed or in production. And at least 50% of the titles should be written by authors who are neither shareholders nor owners of the publishing firm. These are some of the activities that are supported by the program. We do understand that there is still a lot of uncertainty around travel and in-person events, so Ontario Creates has made some adjustments for this year. Eligible activities and costs can include registration and booth exhibitor costs for virtual activities. We're also allowing standard costs for COVID-19 diagnostic tests that are required for travel to in-person events. And we're now allowing companies to apply for support to attend activities that are within Canada. However, they must be outside of Ontario, and the event must focus on international audience and business development opportunities. Just a reminder that any applicant companies that are receiving support for a specific activity through another Ontario Creates program are not eligible to receive additional funding support through the Global Market Development Fund for the same activity. So no double dipping allowed. There are two tiers of funding based on eligible sales revenue of your company. Publishers that have sales revenue from Canadian authored titles of over $400,000 may apply for up to $15,000, capped at 50% of the total cost for all activities. Publishers that have sales revenue from Canadian authored titles of between $20,000 and $400,000 may apply for up to $6,000, capped at 50% of the total costs for all activities. A minimum notice to reader financial statements will be accepted. Financial statements must be prepared and signed by a third-party accountant who is a member in good standing of a provincial branch of the Chartered Professional Accountants. When it's appropriate, Ontario Creates might also provide strategic support at key events to supplement funding provided via this program. Some examples of this might be access to an industry consultant to provide some targeted advice to companies who are participating at a market. We might host some pre-event briefing sessions. We might set up some networking opportunities during an event at a market. The decision to provide this additional support beyond cash that we're giving through the program will be made by Ontario Creates and will be based on the number of Ontario companies attending a specific event, the assessed need for strategic support, and the level of interest in these activities. So, Ontario Creates will support 50% of your costs up to the applicant's respective cap. Some of these eligible costs are market costs like registration and exhibitor booth expenses. This includes registration and exhibitor expenses at virtual events as well. There's also travel costs, flights, local transportation, hotel, any COVID tests for travel. We also support per diems at the rate of $100 per day. And we will be supporting the cost of the creation of marketing materials that are created especially for those proposed activities. Please keep in mind that this year, the cost for these marketing materials is capped at 30% of the total costs per activity. Ontario Creates will cover the arrival the day prior to and the departure the day after an event. That's an in-person event. Any additional time at an event must be addressed in the application, and you should provide a rationale for why you need to stay the additional days. Expenses for extended stays over weekends will not be eligible. Author attendance will be considered an approved cost on the marketing materials line in the budget, but the strategic initiative Ontario Authors on Tour support, which some of you might know as OATS, does provide support specifically for authors to tour for readings and events. OATS will be delivered through the Ontario Creates Book Fund, so you may want to apply for that author support there. Once again, please do remember that any applicant activities that are receiving support for a specific activity through another Ontario Creates program are not eligible to receive support through this fund for the same activity. And the ineligible costs. These would be things like hospitality, core business costs like business cards and standard catalogs, communications costs, costs for any additional or ineligible company representatives, staff wages and salaries and operations costs. Those are not eligible expenses this year, and any additional costs due to public health measures such as quarantine expenses. How to submit your application. So, all applications must be submitted online via our online application portal. You fondly know that as the OAP. Please be advised that our program staff cannot see what the portal looks like as it appears to clients. So if you have any technical issues while filling in your application, please contact our IT team at applyhelp@ontariocreates.ca. There's always someone on duty and they are happy to give you a hand. You can always start your application now and continue to build on it over time until the deadline day. But do keep in mind that only one person can work on an application in the OAP at any given time. Otherwise, you'll be writing over each other and saving over each other's work. Please also be sure to save your work frequently. There's nothing more disappointing than losing a bunch of text that you spent a lot of time working on. On the deadline day, please keep in mind that there are also lots of other applications in progress on the portal, so it might run a bit more slowly due to the volume of applications that are in progress. Plan your time accordingly. Some important sections of the form that you should keep an eye out for. We'll be asking you to provide a summary of your previous experience attending international events, including an outline of any critical and commercial successes to date with respect to your company's publishing activities. We'll be asking you to outline your company's overall global market development plan, including an explanation of how this plan relates to your overall business objectives. And if your company has previously received support from Ontario Creates through the Export Fund, please provide us with an explanation of the impact that prior contributions from the program have had on your company's business development outcomes. We'll also be asking for some supporting documents to be uploaded into the OAP. For each individual activity, we'll need a separate document listing the name, the description of the event, the dates, the website, your previous history attending this event, your rationale for attending, your objectives, and the expected results. We'll also ask you to upload your marketing plans, any marketing materials or rights catalogs that you have, or some specific promo pieces and plans if you've got them. We'll be asking you to upload a budget template. This must be uploaded in the OAP. There is a new budget template that we've developed for this year, so please do not reuse last year's. The budget is an Excel document that consists of several tabs, worksheets within the actual Excel document itself. Please fill this in carefully and be mindful of the built-in formulas. You can modify and add and delete rows and sheets as you would like, but there are some built-in formulas, so keep that in mind when you're making any adjustments. There's a notes field where you can explain any additional costing, like additional time in an event or a breakdown of the costs for some of your marketing materials. Some things that we're asking you not to do: please do not reuse documents from previous years. You might be using an older one that still references our old name, OMDC, or there might be errors in the formulas. Please don't reuse your summary pages from last year. Event dates change, your priorities might change, especially after the cancellation of several recent events or the pivot to online. And don't include any ineligible expenses. So here's the decision criteria and their weightings. Ontario Creates applies a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion to the evaluation criteria for this program. And we direct our jury members to do the same. Applicants that are proposing projects and activities that support and reflect diversity are expected to tangibly demonstrate a genuine and sustained commitment to these equity-seeking communities. We'll be using the provincial definition, which is very broad. The dimensions of diversity according to this definition include, but aren't limited to, ancestry, culture, ethnicity, gender identity, gender expression, language, physical and intellectual ability, race, religion, creed, sex, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. So the weightings are as followed. We'll be looking at your company background and track record. That's 30% of the score. We're looking for your company's global market readiness, some prior results in the old Export Fund, previous experience at international markets, your critical and commercial successes. Here's where you can also tell us some information about your company, including diversity among your senior leadership, staff, contract employees. You can tell us an explanation of some of your company's policies or activities that you'll be doing to support diversity and equity and inclusion. This is really sort of a component about who, and it tells us about your company. We'll also be looking at the objectives for your activities and the strength of your overall plan. That's 20%. Here's where we'll be looking for information about your company's proposed global market development activities and how that plan relates to your company's short and long-term business objectives. We'd like to see well-defined descriptions for your individual activities or markets, a reasonable and detailed budget, and if applicable, evidence of thoughtful consultation, collaboration, and participation of equity-seeking communities. This is a bit of the how and why. So we'd like you to explain that plan to us a little bit more. Then we'll be looking at your business market development outcomes and impact. We're looking for these to be clearly stated and supported. We'd like them to be defined, achievable, measurable. So some quantifiable results as well. You know, an investment of X number of dollars will generate Y number of dollars in results. We will also consider qualitative outcomes such as partnerships for future business, planned meetings and any new contacts that you'll be making, media coverage. So again, this is another question about how this will benefit and how it will help grow your company. We'll be looking at the suitability of the activities that you've proposed in your plan. So we'd like to see a clear explanation of the activity's potential to advance your business development goals, your company growth, and profitability. And if applicable, again, this is a chance for you to talk about any culturally appropriate initiatives to engage with equity-seeking communities. This is where and when activities will be taking place, so we can see how those activities support your overall plan. And we'll be looking as well at the suitability of products for the international markets. That's 15%. Evaluating the nature and the content of your titles. Uploading a catalog is one option. It might be useful to provide some more detailed information about specific titles in some instances, if you think that would be necessary. This is a bit of a why, so you can, or sorry, a what. You can tell us what you're selling. Something to keep in mind as well is that this is a competitive program, so previous success doesn't always mean success in future years. Ontario Creates does understand that COVID-19 has created many challenges across the creative industries. And as a result of this, we have made some updates to the program to reflect the uncertainty around travel and virtual international business opportunities. Some of these updates include registration and booth exhibitor costs for virtual events now being eligible expenses. COVID-19 travel tests are now also considered to be eligible expenses. And successful recipients will be allowed to make up to 3 activity changes during the program cycle. This is an increase from previous years when we only allowed 2. Please remember that, as always, activity changes must be submitted to us via the online application portal and approved by Ontario Creates in advance. And during these continuing unprecedented times, we do encourage companies to submit carefully considered, realistic, and well-researched activity plans. This is a really simple chart to sort of show the process for successful applicants to the program. Funding decisions will be sent via the online application portal, and the contracting process might take some time. One of the things that we do need is an insurance certificate. This is required, and it must be provided to Ontario Creates prior to your contract being issued. Again, this is another reminder for you to review the program guidelines for more information about those insurance requirements. Please be sure to also review your insurance certificates carefully before submitting them to Ontario Creates to make sure that they've got all the information that we need. If you are successful, you can go ahead and book your travel. Companies are responsible for making their own travel arrangements, registrations for markets, and booking their own accommodation. The payment schedule will be in 2 stages. It'll be 60% dispersed upon execution of the contract, and then there'll be 40% that will be dispersed upon approval of your final report. We will require you to submit an interim report, but it's not tied to a payment. This is an opportunity to check in on your progress at the midway point during the program cycle. It's also an opportunity for you to request any changes to activities that might be planned for later on in the program cycle. I'll remind you again that any activity changes must be approved in advance by Ontario Creates. We are very flexible, but we cannot approve changes after the fact or at the time of reporting. Previously, we only allowed 2 changes per cycle, but this cycle we've increased this to 3. When you are requesting a change of activity, there'll be 2 documents that we need. One is a change of activity form. You can download this from our website, but we'll also need a revised budget template to show these new expenses. You'll need to submit both of these documents via the portal. Please do not send it via email. And for the interim report and the final reports, please be sure to use the cost report templates that are provided. For these reports, we're looking for results again. So quantifiable results such as the dollar value of any deals, sales, licensing, financing, co-financing, and partnerships, or qualitative results, relationships for future business, media coverage. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to summarize a few final tips that might be helpful for the process of preparing and submitting your application. Review the guidelines. All of them, read them multiple times. We have made some changes this year, so review them carefully. Ensure that you meet the eligibility requirements of the program. Get your documentation in order. Register in the online application portal if you haven't done so already. Double check that your signing officer form is up to date. Double check that the contact email that you've got in the OAP is correct, because that's where all of our notification emails will be sent. Ontario Creates program staff cannot update any of your corporate information in the portal. You'll have to do that on your own. Please register for direct deposit from Ontario Creates if you haven't already, so that we can get that money to you even faster. And as well, allow adequate time to prepare your application, because on deadline day, the OAP is going to run a little bit more slowly due to that volume. Plan your time carefully. You might prefer to work on your application outside of the OAP in like a Word document, and then you can copy paste your answers inside. That's something that some people like to do. Make sure that your application is well written. Check it over carefully. Make sure there's no typos. And make sure that you've provided all of the information that we've requested on the templates that we have provided you. Please don't reuse templates from previous years. Some companies find it helpful to have someone from outside review the material to see if it makes sense. A reminder as well, when you're working in the OAP, to save your work frequently. And just consider how your documentation is uploaded into the portal. Is it formatted correctly? Is it oriented correctly so that we open it, it's not upside down, that sort of thing. Remember that an application is a bit of a sales job, so sell your company. Explain to us why we should select your project and your company over another one. Don't make assumptions that we know who you are or that we understand your projects, and don't assume that you'll get in just based on your reputation. Again, this is a competitive process. If you've got any questions, please get in touch. We are absolutely here to help. We want you to succeed and to submit the very best application that you can. I cannot look at any applications before they're submitted, but I'm happy to talk to you about your application in advance. And after decisions have been made, we are always happy to provide feedback on your application. So feel free to reach out and get in touch with us afterwards if you'd like. One last reminder that this information session isn't a substitute for reading the guidelines. Please read the guidelines. And if you still have questions, the team at Ontario Creates is always here to help you. So please feel free to get in touch with us via email. You'll see our contact information here on screen. Thanks for your time today.